Let's begin with something honest. When most people hear the phrase, "nothing triggers you," they imagine a kind of emotional Teflon, a person so serene, so detached, that the chaos of the world simply slides off them without leaving a mark. They picture a monk on a mountain, or a guru who smiles gently at insults while you're still fuming 2 hours later about what someone said in a meeting. Here is the truth. That image is a fantasy, and chasing it may actually be one of the greatest obstacles to genuine inner peace. The goal of this talk is not to help you become a person who feels nothing. Feeling is not the problem. Reactivity, that automatic, unconscious, hijacked response to feeling, that is what we're here to address. There is a profound difference between experiencing an emotion and being consumed by it, between noticing that someone's words stung and spending the next 4 days replaying the conversation in your head. Inner peace is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of a stable ground beneath your emotions, so that no matter what rises, you do not lose yourself in it. Over the next 23 minutes, we are going to explore the psychology behind why we get triggered, what is actually happening in the brain and body when we react, and most importantly, what it means to cultivate a genuine, durable state of inner stability. Not as a performance, not as suppression, but as a real, lived experience that you carry with you into traffic, into difficult conversations, and into the quiet moments before sleep. Before we can dissolve something, we need to understand it clearly. So let us define what a trigger actually is, because the word gets used loosely. A trigger is any external stimulus, a word, a tone, a situation, a person, a memory that activates a disproportionate emotional response. Notice the word disproportionate. That's the key. It's not simply that you feel something. It's that the intensity of what you feel is out of proportion to what's actually happening in the present moment. Someone is 5 minutes late, and you feel a surge of rage that doesn't match the inconvenience. Your partner uses a particular phrase, and suddenly you're not just mildly annoyed, you're furious, or devastated, or cold. You see someone else succeeding online, and an old heavy shame descends on you before you've even processed what you've seen. These reactions are almost never about the present, they are about the past. Every trigger is a wound that hasn't yet become wisdom. Psychologists call this a schema activation. Schemas are mental frameworks, deep, often unconscious beliefs about ourselves, other people, and the world that were formed in early experiences. When something in the present resembles the conditions under which a painful schema was formed, the brain fires as if the original threat is happening again, right now, even if you are perfectly safe. The man who flies into a cold silence when he feels criticized isn't just reacting to his colleague's tone. He is likely reacting to every moment in his childhood where criticism meant danger, where a wrong answer meant punishment, withdrawal of love, or humiliation. Understanding this does not excuse the reaction, but it does transform our relationship to it. Instead of asking, "Why am I so weak?" we begin to ask, "What unhealed part of me just spoke?" That is where real work begins. The neuroscience of reactivity lets go a little deeper into what's actually happening in your nervous system when you get triggered, because this knowledge is profoundly liberating. Your brain has a structure called the amygdala, two small, almond-shaped clusters deep in the temporal lobe. The amygdala is your alarm system. Its job, evolutionarily, is to scan the environment for threats and fire an emergency response before your conscious mind has even had time to process the situation. It was designed for survival in a world of predators and physical danger, but it doesn't always distinguish well between a charging lion and a passive-aggressive email. When the amygdala detects a threat, real or perceived, it triggers what we know as the fight-flight-freeze response. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, blood flow is redirected from the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, reasoning, empathizing part of your brain, toward the limbs, preparing you to act. This is called an amygdala hijack, and when it happens, you are literally, physiologically, less capable of rational thought. You are operating from an older, more primitive part of the brain. This is why you can say things in moments of anger that you would never say when calm. It's not that you're a bad person. You've temporarily lost access to your most evolved cognitive capacities. The amygdala does not know the difference between being criticized by your boss and being chased by a predator. To it, both are threats. Here is what changes everything. The amygdala's response typically peaks within 6 to 8 seconds. After that, if you don't add fuel through rumination, through retaliatory action, through catastrophizing, it begins to subside. This is why the old advice of counting to 10 is not just folk wisdom. It is neuroscience. You are waiting for your prefrontal cortex to come back online. The people we perceive as emotionally unshakable are not people who don't have amygdala responses. They are people who, through practice, have learned to shorten the duration of those responses and return to equilibrium more quickly. They have, in effect, trained the gap between stimulus and response. Now we arrive at one of the most important concepts in the psychology of inner peace: the role of the ego and narrative identity in sustaining reactivity. Most of our triggers are not just about what happened. They are about what we tell ourselves what happened means, and most of those stories center on the ego, the constructed sense of self that we spend enormous energy protecting and defending. When someone contradicts us, the ego hears, "I am wrong," and being wrong threatens the ego's image of itself as intelligent, competent, worthy. When someone ignores us, the ego hears, "I am insignificant." When someone succeeds where we have struggled, the ego hears, "I am less than." None of these interpretations may be accurate, but the ego doesn't traffic in accuracy, it traffics in protection. The psychologist Jonathan Haidt describes the mind as having two parts: the rider and the elephant. The elephant is the vast, powerful, emotional unconscious. It moves where it wants to move. The rider is the rational, conscious mind. It believes it is in charge, but it is largely along for the ride, constructing post hoc justifications for wherever the elephant has already decided to go. This is why talking ourselves out of triggers using logic is often ineffective in the moment. The elephant has already moved. We need to work with the elephant, not just the rider. One of the most effective ways to work with the ego's stories is simply to name them. Not to fight them, not to shame yourself for having them, but to bring them into the light of conscious awareness. I'm telling myself that his silence means he doesn't respect me. I'm telling myself that her success exposes my failure. The moment you see the story as a story, you create distance from it. You are no longer inside the story. You are observing it. This capacity for self-observation, what psychologists call metacognition, is one of the most powerful tools available to any human being who wishes to live with greater peace and intentionality. Emotional regulation versus emotional suppression. Here, we must make a critical distinction, because this is where many people pursuing inner peace inadvertently harm themselves. Emotional suppression, the act of pushing emotions down, refusing to acknowledge them, pretending they don't exist, is not inner peace. It is a pressure cooker. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They compress, they accumulate, and they tend to resurface, often with greater force, often in the wrong contexts, often directed at the wrong people. Research in emotion science consistently shows that suppression increases physiological stress markers, impairs memory and cognition, and damages interpersonal relationships because other people can sense the incongruence between what we express and what we actually feel. Emotional regulation is something entirely different. It is the capacity to feel an emotion fully, to allow it to move through you without being governed by it. It is the difference between being a riverbank and being a dam. The dam blocks. The riverbank allows the water to flow while remaining stable. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness in which emotions arise. The psychologist Susan David calls emotional agility the ability to step out, step in, and move on. To observe our thoughts and feelings from a place of gentle curiosity, rather than judgment or fusion with them. To say, "I notice I'm feeling anxious," rather than "I am anxious." The distinction sounds small. The difference in lived experience is enormous. Healthy emotional regulation involves three things. First, recognition, actually noticing what you're feeling, naming it precisely. Research by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman found that labeling an emotion reduces amygdala activation. The simple act of naming what you feel begins to calm the storm. Second, allowance, permitting the feeling to be present without immediately acting on it or fighting it. Third, discernment, consciously choosing how to respond, if at all, rather than automatically reacting. Notice that nowhere in that process does "pretend you don't feel it" appear. The goal is not to eliminate emotional experience. The goal is to stop being at its mercy. The 4 pillars of inner stability, based on decades of research in psychology, neuroscience, contemplative practice, and trauma therapy, we can identify 4 foundational pillars that support genuine, lasting inner stability. Not a performance of peace, but the real thing. The first pillar is self-knowledge. Socrates told us to know ourselves, and 2.5 millennia later the advice holds. The more clearly you understand your own patterns, your specific triggers, the schemas beneath them, the early experiences that shape them, the less power those patterns have over you. This is the work of therapy, of journaling, of honest self-inquiry. It is often uncomfortable work. It requires looking at parts of ourselves we'd rather not see, but there is no shortcut. You cannot transcend what you have not first acknowledged. The second pillar is present moment anchoring. The vast majority of emotional distress is not about what is happening right now. It is about what happened before or what might happen in the future. The mind that lives in the present moment really lives there, not just visits, as a mind that encounters life as it actually is, rather than through the distorting lens of unresolved past or imagined future. Practices like mindfulness meditation, breathwork, and somatic awareness build this capacity systematically. The breath, in particular, is remarkable. It is always happening now, and by attending to it, you anchor yourself in the only moment that actually exists. The third pillar is secure identity. People who are most destabilized by external triggers tend to have identities that are largely dependent on external validation. When their worth is tied to how others perceive them, every slight becomes an existential threat. The development of what psychologists call a stable, internalized sense of self, a knowing of who you are and what you value that doesn't require constant confirmation from the outside, is transformative. This is not arrogance. It is groundedness. It is the difference between a tree with deep roots and one with shallow roots. Both may sway in the wind. Only one stays standing in the storm. The fourth pillar is compassion, and I want to be specific. I mean both self-compassion and other compassion in equal measure. When you extend genuine compassion to yourself, when you treat your own struggles with the same kindness you would offer a good friend, the inner critic quiets. And when you see other people clearly, as beings who, like you, are doing the best they can with the wounds and fears they carry, their behavior stops feeling personal. Most of what people do that hurts us isn't actually about us. It's about them. Compassion is not naive. It does not require you to accept poor treatment, but it does remove the sting of taking it personally. Practical exercises for daily peace. Let's get concrete. What can you actually do, starting today, to move toward this kind of inner stability? Here are several practices, grounded in research, that compound over time. The first is the stop practice. Whenever you notice you're getting activated, your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, your thoughts start racing, use the acronym STOP. Stop what you're doing. Take a breath, slow and deliberate. Observe what's happening in your body and mind without judgment. Proceed with intention rather than reaction. This takes less than 30 seconds and interrupts the automatic chain of reactivity. The second is trigger journaling. At the end of each day, spend 5 minutes writing about any moments when you felt disproportionately reactive. Don't judge yourself, simply inquire. What happened? What did I feel in my body? What story did I tell myself about what it meant? What earlier experience does this remind me of? Over time, you begin to see your own patterns with remarkable clarity, and named patterns lose their grip. The third practice is the renegotiation of your relationship with silence. Many people fill every moment with noise screens, podcasts, music, because silence brings them face to face with their own inner world, which can feel uncomfortable. But it is in silence that self-knowledge deepens. Start with 10 minutes a day. Sit without input. Notice what arises. This is not necessarily formal meditation, though meditation is excellent. It is simply giving your inner life enough quiet to be heard. The fourth practice is the love-and-kindness meditation, or metta. This practice involves silently directing genuine wishes of well-being toward yourself. First, may I be well, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering, and then expanding those wishes outward to others, including, eventually, people who have hurt you. This sounds sentimental until you practice it consistently, at which point it becomes one of the most disarming things a human being can do. Research shows it measurably increases positive affect, reduces implicit bias, and improves emotional regulation. Finally, practice what the Stoic philosophers called the view from above. When you are in the grip of a trigger, deliberately zoom your perspective outward, not to dismiss the feeling but to contextualize it. Will this matter in 5 years? Am I the first human being to feel this? What would I advise a friend in this exact situation? Perspective is not detachment, it is wisdom. And wisdom, when it becomes habitual, becomes peace. Peace is a practice, not a destination. 2140 to 2300. I want to close with something I hope you will carry with you. Inner peace is not a place you arrive at and stay. It is not a certificate you earn after enough therapy or meditation or self-help content. It is a practice, a daily moment-by-moment orientation. It will be imperfect. You will still be triggered. You will still say things you regret, still feel the flood of an old wound reopening, still find certain people or situations seemingly designed to undo every bit of progress you've made. That is not failure. That is being human. What changes with time and practice is not the absence of these moments but your relationship to them. You return to center more quickly. You observe your own reactions with curiosity rather than shame. You begin to see your triggers as teachers rather than enemies, each one pointing precisely at the place that most needs your attention and your care. The goal is not to become someone who never feels the waves. The goal is to become the ocean, vast enough, deep enough, that no wave, however large, threatens to capsize you entirely. That is inner peace. Not a destination. A practice. And it begins, as all lasting change does not out there but in here.